New York blazed with the glow of billboards, where Sophia Carter walked like a fashion icon, yet within her heart lingered an emptiness that had never been filled. 15 years ago, her father, Rick Hawthorne, abandoned the family to chase another love, only to end up a failure, while her mother, Evelyn, rose from the ruins to build an empire. But when Rick suddenly returned frail, sickly, the past they thought was buried began to resurface, threatening everything they had built. Between radiance and shadow, forgiveness and resentment, each must choose. Can the love of family be redeemed, or are there wounds that will never truly heal? That night, Beverly Hills was draped in a heavy curtain of rain, streetlights blurred, as if someone had smeared the city with their hand. In the distance, the shriek of a car engine cut through the storm before vanishing again into the vast emptiness of palm-lined roads and neatly trimmed white fences. Inside the villa at the end of Crescent Drive, Evelyn Carter sat by a wide glass window, her eyes following the long raindrops sliding down the pane. It had been a long time since she had felt such weight in her chest, not quite sorrow, but a strange, gnawing premonition, the kind that whispered something was about to happen. The clock above the fireplace struck 9:47 p.m. Normally at this hour, Evelyn would still be sifting through contracts from Carter & Co.'s New York headquarters, or on a quick video call with Sophia in Milan for Fashion Week. But tonight, she had shut her laptop early, poured herself a glass of red wine, and sat quietly in the rain's company. Then came the knock. At first, faint like a tree branch tapping against the wooden door, Evelyn frowned. This neighborhood was always so quiet, and she rarely had visitors unannounced. On rainy nights in Beverly Hills, people preferred the warmth of their own homes. Who would be knocking at this hour? The knock came again, louder, faster, urgent. A cold shiver slid down Evelyn's spine. She set her glass down, pulled on a light cardigan, and walked toward the front door. The porch light spilled across the marble steps, illuminating the silhouette of a man, drenched from head to toe. Evelyn opened the door just enough for her eyes to see, and her heart froze. Rick Hawthorne, the man who had once been her husband. Once, she was everything, and the man who had ripped her life clean in two. For a few seconds, Evelyn stood frozen, as though time had snapped back 15 years. But no, before her was no longer the proud Rick with his tailored suits and arrogant, room-commanding gaze. The man standing there was gaunt, his soaked clothes clinging to a skeletal frame, his face hollow, unrecognizable, speckled gray hair, sunken eyes, sallow skin. Evelyn. His voice was hoarse, each word scratching its way out of his throat. I have nowhere else to go." Evelyn said nothing. Her hand gripped the door tightly, torn between slamming it shut and the strange pull of something deeper, something old. She could hear her heartbeat thundering in her ears, could almost hear the echo of a door slamming 15 years ago, the night he left with Vanessa Lee without a goodbye. "I just need one night. Just one night." One night, the words burned. How many nights had she lain awake after he disappeared? How many nights had she soothed Sophia and Olivia's tears when they asked why Daddy wasn't coming home? She turned her grief into fuel, building Carter & Co. from nothing while teaching herself never to look back. And now, here he was asking for one night. The rain fell harder, pelting the marble steps. Rick trembled, whether from the cold or shame. Evelyn couldn't tell. She drew a deep breath, then pulled the door wider. "The living room. Go." Rick bowed his head, stepping inside. Evelyn led the way without another word. The scent of wet fabric filled the polished hallway. She tossed him a towel without looking. "Thank you," he whispered. Evelyn didn't respond. She poured herself another glass of wine, her hand unsteady. The house that had long been silent now held a shadow from her past, familiar, but foreign. Her heart beat erratically, but it wasn't love. It was the chaos of memory. When she returned, Rick was slumped on the white leather sofa, the towel draped over his shoulders. His gaze rested on a photograph hanging on the wall. Evelyn with their daughters at graduation, smiling with pride. A family whole except for him. "They've grown so much," Rick murmured. "They grew up without you," Evelyn said coldly. Rick bowed his head in silence. Anger tightened in her chest. For 15 years, she had forged steel in the boardroom, and earned her name as one of the most powerful women in America. But here he was, and her old scars ached anew. "Why are you here, Rick?" Evelyn's voice cut sharply. He looked up, his eyes extinguished. "I've lost everything, Evelyn. Vanessa left. The company's gone. Friends gone. And they told me I have stage 3 cancer." The air froze. Evelyn's heart stuttered, but her face remained composed. "That's not my problem," she said. Rick nodded, as if he had expected nothing else. He didn't beg, didn't argue. He leaned back against the sofa, closing his eyes like a man too tired to fight. Evelyn turned away, climbing the staircase. At the railing, she stopped, hand clenched white against the wood. For an instant, she saw herself 15 years ago, young, abandoned, clutching 2 little girls with nowhere to go. She closed her eyes. "You can stay. One night. Only one night." Rick opened his eyes. His lips trembled. "Thank you." Evelyn didn't answer. She shut herself in her room, her back pressed against the wooden door. Her vision blurred, but no tears fell. Evelyn Carter no longer cried for Rick Hawthorne, yet she knew. Tonight was the beginning of a reckoning long delayed. The clock read 10:12. Barely 25 minutes since the knock, but enough to tear the dust off 15 years of memory. Sleep refused her. Images returned unbidden. Their wedding on Malibu Beach, Rick's smile as he cradled newborn Sophia and Olivia, the flashbulbs the night he walked away with Vanessa Lee. Below, Rick coughed harshly in the living room. Evelyn shut her eyes tighter. The house was no longer silent. Peace had been disturbed. The storm outside showed no sign of easing. Rain lashed against the roof. Wind whistled through the palms, a heavy, relentless song. Evelyn turned restlessly, trapped in a golden cage of her own success, imprisoned by old ghosts. She heard it then, the faint scrape of the sofa, the muffled coughs, the labored breathing. Her body tensed, torn between going down to check on him and letting him collapse alone. Finally, she sat up, hugged her knees, and sighed. The image of Rick drenched, trembling, begging for shelter would not leave her. Her footsteps echoed down the stairs. In the living room, Rick sat hunched, staring blankly at an oil painting. "Can't sleep." Evelyn's voice was calm. He startled, then forced a thin, pitiful smile. "I'd forgotten what it felt like, to sit in a home truly quiet. I've stayed in so many places, cheap motels, temporary rentals, but none ever felt like home." "Don't call this home," Evelyn said sharply. "It's not yours." Rick lowered his head. Silence pressed heavily. Evelyn poured a glass of water and set it down without looking at him. "You can stay until morning. But don't mistake this for opening a door I closed 15 years ago." Rick nodded. "I know." She turned to leave. His voice followed. "Evelyn, I'm sorry." She stopped, but didn't turn. For years, she had dreamed of hearing those words. But now that they came, they carried no weight at all. She inhaled deeply, then walked away, leaving him alone in the cavernous room. The next morning, golden sunlight streamed through tall windows, gleaming on marble floors. In a silk robe, hair neatly pinned, Evelyn descended to the kitchen. The aroma of Arabica coffee filled the air. She poured a cup, determined to begin the day as usual, yet Rick's presence lingered like a shadow. He sat at the dining table, pale, with dark circles under his eyes. He looked at her, but Evelyn only set down her cup without a word. "Evelyn, I'll go as soon as the weather clears. You don't need to explain." She cut him off. Her voice was steel. "I don't want to hear your pity. You made your choice. You lived with it for 15 years. Don't think walking back here earns you forgiveness." Rick's lips tightened. He nodded, small, subdued. Nothing like the powerful man he once was. Evelyn sat across from him, her gaze slicing through. "Do you know what I endured? You left me with 2 10-year-old girls, a house about to be seized, and a company that was nothing but a dream. I borrowed. I worked myself to exhaustion. I stood against sneers and contempt to survive. And do you know what hurt the most, Rick?" His hands trembled. "Not the betrayal, not Vanessa Lee. It was how you vanished, as if we had never existed." The silence was suffocating. Rick buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking. Evelyn watched, her eyes devoid of softness. She rose, abandoning her untouched coffee. "Last night, I gave you a roof. Today, you leave. We have nothing more to say." Tears rimmed Rick's eyes. "I just want to see the girls, even once." Evelyn paused at the doorway. "Inhaled deeply. Sophia in New York. Olivia is in San Francisco. Both strong. Both are unwilling to forgive the father who abandoned them. Evelyn knew he would face them one day, but not today. They'll decide if they want to see you." "That's not mine to choose," she said, then walked out. Rick remained alone in the bright kitchen. His gaze wandered over paintings, furniture, every detail stamped with Evelyn Carter's will, a world she had built without him. Outside, the rain had ended. Sunlight glistened down the slope, promising a new day. But inside the villa, the air remained heavy, carrying the echo of a knock at 9:47 the night before. In her study, Evelyn opened her laptop. A new email from Sophia appeared. "Mom, is everything okay? I had the strangest feeling. I'll call you tonight." Evelyn allowed herself a faint smile. Her daughter's intuition was uncanny. It was time Sophia and Olivia learned the truth. Rick Hawthorne had returned. Early mornings in Los Angeles always carried a deceptive calm. As the sun rose over the Pacific, a pale gold light spilled across the hills of Beverly Hills, gilding the luxury villas with an almost divine glow. Yet behind each polished facade lay untold stories, and inside Evelyn Carter's home, a storm waited, quiet, but inevitable. Evelyn stood before the wide glass window of her study, espresso in hand, her gaze lost over the city skyline. Sleep had eluded her. All night long, the image of Rick sitting alone in the living room, gaunt, diminished, kept returning, haunting her thoughts. Why had she opened the door? Compassion, memory, or some unspoken weakness she despised? She hated this feeling. 15 years she had built steel walls, fortifying herself to never waver before any man, least of all Rick Hawthorne. A knock broke her reverie. Evelyn turned. Rick stood at the threshold, cleaner now, dressed in a white shirt and dark trousers borrowed from the guest room wardrobe. He looked almost respectable, but his face betrayed exhaustion. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" His voice was rough. Evelyn set her cup down, arms folded. "You're still here, which means I've already given you borrowed time. Don't abuse it." Rick stepped in slowly. "I know you don't want to listen, but I must say this. I've lost everything. The empire I thought was invincible collapsed in a few short years. And somewhere along the way, I lost myself, too." Evelyn's lips curved in a bitter smile. How surprising. The man who once thought himself God finally learns he's a mortal. Rick didn't argue. He drew a deep breath. "I have cancer, Evelyn, stage 3. The doctors, they can't promise anything. And the moment I heard the diagnosis, the first name in my mind was yours." Her heart clenched, but her face gave nothing away. "You think that will make me soften? After everything?" Rick's eyes held hers. "No, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't want to die without facing my family." The air froze. Evelyn turned away, her hand tracing spines of thick books on the shelf, as if grounding herself against the surge within. "Family?" She let out a sharp laugh. "You left that behind long ago. The night you walked out with a suitcase and didn't look back. Do you know what I told Sophia and Olivia when they asked where you were? That you were busy with work, that you loved them. I lied to my daughters for years to keep their hope alive, until one day they realized the truth. You chose another woman over them." Rick lowered his head, his hands clenched white. "I know I destroyed everything, but Evelyn, please, give me a chance, not to win you back, to see them, to tell them it was never their fault." Silence stretched. Sunlight reached through the window, illuminating Evelyn's face with its harsh honesty. Finally, she spoke. "I'll tell Sophia and Olivia, but the choice to meet you belongs to them. You have no rights left in their lives." Rick looked up, a flicker of fragile hope in his eyes. "That's all I ask. Thank you." Evelyn turned away again, hiding the fleeting softness in her expression. Inside, a battle raged between the fury of a betrayed wife and the compassion of a mother who wanted her daughters to face their truth. That afternoon, Evelyn drove her black Range Rover toward downtown Los Angeles for a board meeting at Carter & Co.'s regional office. But her thoughts remained tangled around Rick. She remembered him 15 years ago swaggering in Armani suits, walking into Manhattan boardrooms as though they belonged to him. Once, she had admired that confidence. Now, she realized it wasn't confidence at all. It was arrogance. Her phone buzzed. Sophia's call lit the screen. Evelyn answered on speaker. "Mom, I just had the strangest dream. I saw Dad. He looked terrible. Is something going on?" Evelyn tightened her grip on the wheel. Sophia's intuition had never failed her. "My love," she said softly, "you may need to prepare yourself. Your father has come back." There was silence. Then Sophia's voice, clipped and cold. "He dares to return. He says he wants to see you both. But I won't force you. This choice is yours." A long sigh. "I'll face him. But if he thinks a few words of apology will erase everything, he's wrong." "And Olivia?" Evelyn asked. "I'll call her. But you know, Olivia, she'll be far colder than I am." Evelyn nodded, eyes fixed on the road. The real storm was only beginning. That evening, in her minimalist San Francisco apartment, Olivia listened as Sophia relayed the news. She set her pen down, leaned back in her chair, and murmured, "I'm not surprised. Men like him, when they lose everything, they crawl back to the place they once abandoned." Sophia sighed. "But what if he really is dying? Do you want to see him?" Olivia stared through the window at the Golden Gate Bridge, half shrouded in fog. Her eyes hardened. "I'll see him. Not because I want to. Because I need to look into the face of the man who taught me the harshest lesson. Not everyone who promises love stays." Sophia was silent. Then, "We'll face him together. But remember, Olivia, don't let him believe showing up is enough." Olivia's lips curved coldly. "Don't worry. I haven't forgotten the past." 2 days later, sunlight poured over Evelyn's Beverly Hills villa. The sky was impossibly blue, the palms like spears piercing its stillness. Yet within, Evelyn knew today would be anything but serene. Sophia had flown in from New York that morning. Olivia had driven from San Francisco the night before. Her daughters, her steel-forged weapons, were ready to confront the father who left them. Evelyn sat in the living room, coffee in one hand, leather-bound journal in the other. She wrote, "Today, truth will walk into this room. Nothing can be hidden, and I will not be the judge. My daughters will." Outside, a car pulled into the drive. Evelyn closed the journal. The front door opened. Sophia entered first cream jumpsuit, sleek hair, eyes sharp as blades. Olivia followed dark jeans, leather jacket, laptop still in hand as if she'd come straight from her lab. "Mom." Sophia hugged her quickly, firmly. Olivia followed, her embrace colder, eyes unreadable. "He's in the side sitting room," Evelyn said quietly. "Do you want me to?" "No." Olivia's voice cut. "This is between us and him." Sophia glanced at their mother and saw the flicker of worry, but Evelyn nodded. She had raised them for this moment. Rick sat in the armchair by the window, sunlight cruelly outlining every hollow of his face. When he looked up, he saw not the 2 little girls he had left behind, but 2 women, unyielding. They stopped before him. No embrace, no tears, only silence heavy with history. Rick tried. "Sophia, Olivia, my doe." "Stop." Sophia's voice sliced the air. "You have no right to call us that." Rick faltered. Olivia crossed her arms, her eyes cold steel. "What do you want? Why crawl back? Or do you need an audience for your tragic performance?" Rick trembled, struggling to hold steady. "I don't expect forgiveness. I only came to face the truth. I was wrong. I abandoned you." Sophia's mouth twisted into a bitter smile. "Wrong? You shattered us. Do you know how it felt to stand at my graduation, smiling for cameras while my friends asked, 'Where's your dad?' Do you know how I imagined my wedding, dreamed of a father to walk me down the aisle only to realize that space would always be empty?" Rick's eyes brimmed. He couldn't speak. Olivia stepped closer, her voice sharp as glass. "I study life at its smallest scale, decoding the human genome. But there's one thing I've never understood. How a man could abandon his own daughters. Explain that to me." Rick's voice cracked. Because I was selfish. Because I thought I deserved more. And I was wrong. Sophia's eyes glistened but stayed hard. Don't call yourself our father. That man died the night you walked away. From the doorway, Evelyn stood, silent, eyes wet but resolute. This was not her trial to join. It belonged to them. Rick buried his face in his hands, his body trembling. You can hate me. You should. But never believe it was because of you. You were perfect. I was the one unworthy. Sophia studied him, then spoke slowly. If you think a few confessions can erase 15 years, you still don't understand. We're not here to forgive. We're here to ensure you know exactly what your choice costs us. Olivia's voice was like ice. This isn't a reunion. It's a courtroom, and you're the one on trial. Rick bowed his head, tears dripping onto his hands. No longer a titan, no longer a name on magazine covers. Just a broken man in the presence of the family he destroyed. Silence reigned until Sophia broke it. We won't forgive. But we won't run either. You may exist, but you'll never be our father again. Understand? Rick nodded, too weak to lift his gaze. Good, Olivia said, turning away. Then we're done for today. The sisters walked out together, tall and unyielding. Evelyn stepped aside, her eyes full, her lips silent. When the door shut, Rick sat alone in a room full of sunlight, but it had never felt darker for him. That night, on the balcony, Evelyn sat with her daughters. 3 glasses of red wine glowed under the city lights. Sophia sighed. I said everything I needed to say, but it doesn't feel like a release. It feels heavier. Olivia nodded. He's a ghost come back, stripped of power, stripped of glamour. But a ghost is still a ghost. Evelyn's eyes softened as she looked at them. You don't have to forgive. Forgiveness isn't an obligation, but you faced him, and that is our victory. Sophia rested her head on her mother's shoulder. Olivia placed her hand over Evelyn's. 3 women, 3 generations of strength, sat beneath the Los Angeles night sky, knowing a new chapter had begun. But the cracks that never closed would bleed for a long time. The following morning, the Carter estate in Beverly Hills no longer held its usual calm. The air felt taut, straining under the weight of an inevitable reckoning. Evelyn had risen early, preparing the grand living room for what would come. She ordered it cleaned, the curtains drawn wide, sunlight pouring in without mercy. Today, there would be no shadows to hide in. Today, truth would stand naked in the light. Sophia and Olivia had agreed to face Rick again, not to hear more apologies, but to turn the confrontation into a trial. Evelyn did not stop them. She knew her daughters needed to finish the wound themselves, and Rick needed to be forced to account for what he had done, under the gaze of the daughters he had once abandoned. Rick sat waiting in the center chair, as though on trial. His shirt was wrinkled, the top buttons undone, his face ashen. Illness had hollowed his frame, his hands trembling faintly on his knees. Evelyn sat on the sofa to the side, silent, watching like an unseen arbiter of justice. The sisters entered together. In nude heels and a high ponytail, Sophia moved with elegance sharpened into strength. Olivia, in jeans and a crisp white shirt, her thin-framed glasses glinting, carried the gravity of a gavel with each step. Rick pushed himself up, ready to speak, but Olivia raised a hand like a blade. Sit. You're not in the position to begin. He obeyed, sinking back into the chair. Sophia's voice rang clear. We are not here to listen to excuses. We are here for you to listen. 15 years have passed, and you will hear it all today. The air thickened. Evelyn folded her arms, her gaze steady, an overseer, ensuring fairness in this blood trial. Olivia began. The morning you left, I was 10. I went looking for your blue shirt, the one you wore on Sundays. It was gone. I asked Mom, and she told me you were on a business trip. I believed her. For years, I believed her because she tried to protect me. Until I saw your picture in the papers, standing beside Vanessa Lee, smiling, toasting, your hand on her waist. That was the moment my childhood ended. Rick's eyes shut tight, tears bleeding from the corners. Sophia stepped forward, her voice trembling but fierce. And I cried in the bathroom, wondering what I'd done wrong. Every girl wants her father to be proud. When you vanished, I thought it was my fault. So I studied harder, won more awards, hoping you'd come back and notice me. But you never did. Each time I watched Mom work herself to exhaustion, I told myself I would take your place. But the truth is, no one could. You left behind a hole that never closed. Rick bent forward, shoulders shaking. I'm sorry. Stop. Olivia's tone cut like steel. You lost the right to call yourself our father. To us, you are only Rick. And Rick must face responsibility. Sophia's voice sharpened. This is not a reunion. This is a trial. You are the accused, and the charge is betrayal. The sentence is truth etched, so deep you will never forget. Evelyn's chest ached, yet pride swelled. Her daughters, their strength forged in her years of sacrifice, were turning their pain into justice. Rick choked out, "You're right. You were never to blame. You were perfect. I was the coward." Olivia's eyes blazed. "And how long did it take for you to admit that? 15 years? Or did it take a cancer diagnosis to remind you you're just a man after all?" The words struck like a blade. Rick clutched his chest, breathing raggedly, but nodded. Yes, Rick has paid. Not only by losing you, but by losing himself. Sophia stood taller, her voice echoing. No, you haven't lost yourself. You've only begun to feel the emptiness you created, and today we are here to make sure you never forget. Silence pressed down, thick and heavy. Rick sat hunched, hands clasped, his body trembling with every breath. Before him, two women, his daughters, stood not as victims, but as judges. Olivia pulled out her laptop and set it on the table. She opened a folder of photographs. "Would you like to see?" she asked, voice cold as iron. Rick nodded weakly. Click. The first image is of Sophia and Olivia standing beside Evelyn at their high school graduation. Their smiles are bright, but their eyes are empty. Graduation day. Where was our father? In Miami, raising a glass with Vanessa Lee. Do you remember? Rick bit his lip until it bled, tears falling freely. Next photo. Sophia at the ribbon, cutting of her first fashion line in Soho. Evelyn by her side. Olivia too. No Rick. Sophia's line. Where were you? On a yacht in the Mediterranean, in a white suit, champagne in hand. Vanessa by your side. The papers called you the golden couple of fashion and finance. Meanwhile, your real family was absent. Sophia's voice cracked, but she stood firm. I cried in a hotel room that night, wishing for a father's eyes on me, but I learned to stand without you. Click. Olivia is in a lab at Stanford, holding her honorary doctorate, and Evelyn is embracing her. No, Rick, my dissertation defense. Where were you? Strolling in Florence with Vanessa. I was shaking before the committee, staring at the empty chair that should have been yours. Rick covered his face, sobs tearing through him. Each image has a dagger. Olivia snapped the laptop shut. The sound rang like a judge's gavel. That is the evidence. You were absent from every milestone. No apology can erase that. Sophia stepped closer, staring down at him. Do you know what you left behind, Rick? Not just a family. You abandoned two little girls who once idolized you, who believed you were a hero. You killed that illusion. And that death cut deeper than anything. Rick lifted his face, soaked in tears. His voice trembled. I don't ask forgiveness. Only the chance to exist, however small, in what remains. Olivia's arms crossed tight. Exist? You may exist, but never as a father. You are only Rick, the man who destroyed, and now must endure. Sophia nodded. We'll allow you that, but not as mercy, as a sentence. You will be present only to listen, never to claim, never to take. You will learn to exist on the margins. Rick bowed his head, tears falling onto his thin hands. And then for the first time Evelyn spoke. Rick. He looked up. Her eyes were cold steel. You've heard them. Now hear me. You no longer have the power to define us. You no longer have the power to break us. Once, you thought yourself the center. From now on, you will orbit us. You exist only because we allow it. Understand? His lips shook. I understand. Evelyn leaned forward. There is no forgiveness here. We will not forget. But we are strong enough to go on, and you must watch. That is your sentence. Silent, powerless, witness to what you lost. The room fell into stillness. Only the clock ticked, striking seconds like a judge's hammer. Sophia's final words cut the silence. You are no longer the ghost we feared. You are just a man weak, withered, and we don't need you to live. Olivia added, her tone icy, but we will let you remain, not as a father, as a reminder, as witness to everything you missed. The sisters left. Evelyn followed, her last words sharp as judgment. The trial is over. The sentence has been delivered. Now live with it. Rick sat alone in a room flooded with sunlight, but it was the darkest prison to him. Not death, but something worse. Life under the silent verdict of his daughters. Never again have I touched the title of father. That night, in her study, Evelyn opened her leather journal. She wrote, "Today's trial was not punishment, but truth. Rick no longer has the right to deny. Sophia and Olivia have won. I have won. And in the silence, we hear ourselves stronger than ever." She closed the book and snuffed out the candle. Outside, Los Angeles shimmered. But inside Evelyn's heart, a new chapter had begun, one of female power, family justice, and the silent sentence Rick would carry to his grave. Los Angeles glittered outside, a sea of neon and starlight, but inside the Hawthorne mansion, silence reigned. Sophia and Olivia had returned to their hotel, leaving Evelyn alone in a house that felt far too large. She wandered down the corridor with a glass of red wine in hand, her mind still echoing the verdict of the afternoon's trial. Rick hadn't left. He had been granted another night, not out of Evelyn's mercy, but because Sophia had said coldly, "Let him sit there. Let him taste silence." Evelyn agreed, not for pity's sake, but because she knew silence could be the heaviest sentence. She stopped at the doorway of the living room. Rick was still there, slumped in the same chair where he had been questioned. The lamp's warm glow fell across his face, carving out every mark of decay, the wrinkles, the shadows under his eyes, the hollow sockets where pride used to blaze. "You're still here," Evelyn said, her tone neither soft nor cruel. Rick looked up, his lips parted, but her eyes silenced him before he spoke. Evelyn did not need words to command. She entered and sat opposite him. The room shrank around them, as though the past had locked them inside a cage without a key. "You know, Rick," Evelyn said, sipping her wine, her gaze sharp as a blade, "the most frightening thing wasn't that you left. It was that you believed we would collapse without you." Rick exhaled, a sound between a sigh and surrender. "I know I was wrong." "Wrong is too kind," Evelyn said, placing her glass down. She leaned forward, her voice slicing. "It wasn't just wrong, it was cowardice." The words struck harder than a slap. Rick shut his eyes, swallowing the shame. When he opened them again, he saw Evelyn not as the woman he had abandoned, but as a queen upon her throne, staring down at the man who had betrayed her. "You've changed," he rasped. "No," Evelyn corrected. "I've returned to who I was always meant to be. The difference is now I need no man to prove it." Silence. The clock ticked. Then Rick whispered, almost desperately, "But I still desire you." The air froze. Evelyn's lips curved, not in tenderness, but in challenge. Desire. She rose, circling the table, her heels clicking like gavel strikes. She stopped beside him, her presence close, suffocating. "Do you think your desire still has worth after everything?" Rick did not retreat. His eyes, trembling yet earnest, met hers. "I've lost everything. But tonight, when I see you burning, radiant, unshakable, I remember I once held a part of that flame, and I want, if only once more." Evelyn stood behind him and leaned close, her lips brushing the air near his ear. Her whisper cut like silk and fire. "You've forgotten, Rick. Fire can warm, but it can also consume." Rick shuddered, his hand clutching the armrest like a man on the edge of a cliff. Evelyn stepped in front, her eyes aflame. "If you dare touch me tonight, Rick, understand this. It is not love, it is power, and you will be beneath, while I am above." Rick's chest heaved, his voice rough but resolute. "I accept." Evelyn studied him, half contempt, half curiosity. The arrogant titan he once was, now bent low, willing to kneel. For the first time, Evelyn felt not pity, but satisfaction. She placed her hand on his chest, her palm pressing lightly, yet heavy with dominance, a seal of judgment, or perhaps of indulgence. The room thickened. 15 years of silence, betrayal, and hunger unspoken now ignited, swirling like a storm. Rick's breath hitched. Evelyn did not pull away. Memories flashed before her eyes. Their vows, their nights, his betrayal, his downfall. Before her now was not the man who left, but the husk of him pleading, desperate, burning like a moth circling a flame it could never own. "You think I still belong to you?" Evelyn asked, her voice low, knife-edged. Rick shook his head. "No, you belong to no one. But I crave one last touch. Not because I deserve it, but because I have nothing else left." Her lips curled, half mockery, half intrigue. "So you're begging, if you wish to call it that?" "Yes." Evelyn saw it clearly for a fleeting moment. The scales of power had reversed. The man who once walked away now bent beneath her gaze, and it thrilled her. She turned to the window, where Beverly Hills shimmered beyond the glass, her reflection glowing in gold. "If I let you close tonight," she said slowly, "it won't be love. It will be a test. Can you endure it?" Rick rose, his voice steady despite his trembling frame. "Try me." Evelyn's eyes flashed. In a swift motion, she grabbed his collar and pulled him down. Their mouths collided, not tender, not sweet, but feral, two flames striking, burning hot enough to scorch. Rick's hands instinctively reached for her waist, but Evelyn caught his wrists and slammed them against the table. "No, you don't lead. You follow." He nodded, surrender in his eyes. Evelyn's kiss deepened punishment and claim all at once. Each press of her lips and breath carved into him. "You have no power here." She pushed him onto the sofa and climbed astride him, her gaze blazing like a goddess of war. "This," she whispered, "is the throne you abandoned. And now, you kneel beneath it." Rick closed his eyes, letting her take control and command. They were not lovers, but combatants, one conquering, one conquered. Their bodies entwined in a clash of passion and vengeance, the music of breath and shuddering cries filling the gilded cage of the room. When the storm at last ebbed, Evelyn rose first. She adjusted her robe, smoothed her hair, and her expression was calm. Rick sat spent, chest heaving, eyes lost, both redeemed and ruined. "Do not mistake this," Evelyn said coldly. "Tonight was not forgiveness. Tonight was proof. I hold the power. You do not." Rick bowed his head. "I know." She lifted her wine glass, turned her back, and walked out without looking again. Her silhouette disappeared behind the closing door, leaving Rick alone, broken, trembling, scorched by a fire he could never possess again. He pressed his hand to his chest, where her touch still burned. He didn't know whether he had been blessed or cursed, only that Evelyn Carter remained the one flame of his life, unreachable, uncontainable, and never his to claim again. After that night of fire, the Carter mansion on the Beverly Hills hilltop returned to silence, but the air was different. Evelyn moved through her days with composure. Calls with Carter & Co.'s New York headquarters, design meetings in Los Angeles, emails with European partners. Yet inside, she knew something had shifted. Rick remained in the house, a shadow lingering in its corners. He no longer pleaded, excused himself. Instead, he lived quietly, like a tenant passing through. And in that silence, Evelyn noticed something she had not seen in him for years. He was listening. One morning, she found him at the kitchen table, a stack of blank paper before him. His brow furrowed, pen trembling in his hand, like he was wrestling with a ghost. Evelyn said nothing, only poured herself coffee and sat across from him. Rick looked up, startled, then lowered his pen. I'm writing." "What?" Evelyn's voice was calm. "Letters. For Sophia and Olivia. Letters I should have written 15 years ago." Evelyn arched a brow. "You think a few pages will compensate for what you did?" Rick shook his head, voice heavy. "No, but at least They will be true, not for forgiveness. Only so they know they were never the reason I left. Evelyn stayed silent. Part of her wanted to dismiss it too late, too useless. But another part knew. Sometimes, even late truths mattered. Sometimes, lateness itself was its own kind of necessity. That day, Rick wrote for hours. His pen scratched slowly, often stopping mid-sentence, only to begin again. Sheets of paper filled with words lay crumpled around his chair. He wrote, tore, and rewrote like a man learning to speak honestly after years of lying. By evening, 2 envelopes lay on the table, each bearing a name in a shaky but clear hand. Sophia, Olivia. Evelyn approached, eyeing them. "You want me to give these to them?" Rick nodded. "If you allow it." She picked one up, weighing its thickness. "And if I read them first?" Rick met her eyes, then read, "I have nothing left to hide from you." Evelyn studied him for a long moment, then took both envelopes upstairs. In her study, she hesitated, then tore open the one addressed to Sophia. The handwriting was uneven, the sentences raw and unpolished, but every word bled honesty. "Sophia, I've seen your pictures in fashion magazines and New York billboards. You are beautiful, strong, dazzling in ways I never dared imagine. My absence from your milestones, that is the greatest wound of my life. I don't ask for forgiveness. I only want you to know, it was never your fault. You were never the reason I left. The only reason was my own cowardice." Evelyn set the letter down, closing her eyes. She didn't cry, but her heart thundered. She had wanted Rick's remorse for 15 years, and now it sat inked on paper. But was it too late? She opened the second envelope. "Olivia, you were always the quiet one, buried in books. I missed your dissertation defense, violin recitals, and how your eyes searched the crowd for a father who wasn't there. I cannot undo the years. But if you allow, I want to spend whatever days remain not as a hero, but as a silent witness, sitting in the crowd when you need someone to watch." Evelyn sat motionless. She knew Olivia would be cold, while Sophia might soften, yet something had begun. Rick had set the first stone on a long reckoning road. That evening, Sophia called from New York. When Evelyn told her about the letters, Sophia was quiet for a long time, then sighed. "Mom, I don't know if I can bear to read it, but if he truly wrote it, I'll try." Evelyn sent the scan. Hours later, Sophia replied with only one line. "Thanks for passing it on. I need more time." Olivia was different. When Evelyn mentioned it, she said flatly, "Send it. I'll read, but don't expect a reply." Evelyn nodded. That was enough. Night fell. Rick sat alone on the back porch, staring at the vast garden. Evelyn joined him, setting down a cup of tea. She didn't speak. Rick lifted his gaze, eyes wet. "I wrote. I sent. I don't expect anything. Only gratitude that you didn't stop me." Evelyn folded her arms, her gaze fixed outward. "Don't mistake me. I didn't help you. I only let you taste the silence after words are read." Rick bowed his head. He understood, and he accepted. That night, Evelyn wrote in her own journal. "Some letters never arrive on time, but sometimes even lateness can be light. I don't forgive Rick, but I see his effort, small as it is, and I wonder, will that light be enough to guide my daughters?" New York, late at night. Sophia sat in her Park Avenue penthouse, gift boxes from luxury brands scattered across the floor. Outside, the city roared with lights and taxis, but in her hands was not champagne or a designer gown, it was Rick's letter. She had read it once that afternoon, folded it away. Now, near midnight, she reread it. "Sophia, it was never your fault. You were always enough. I was the one lacking." Her lip trembled. She remembered nights in her teens, crying into her pillow, wondering what she had done wrong. Her mother's arms had comforted her, but the emptiness had never left. Part of her wanted to scream. Too late. Too damn late. Yet another part of her, deeper, quivered, because for the first time in 15 years, Rick admitted the fault was his, not theirs. Sophia picked up her phone, typed to her mother, "I've read it. I'm not ready to answer him. But I breathe a little lighter." San Francisco, the same hour. Olivia sat in her Stanford apartment, research files piled beside her, and Rick's letter glowed on her laptop. She read slowly, her brows furrowed. Olivia, I want to be present not as a hero, but as a silent witness. She let out a bitter laugh. A witness. After 15 years of absence, she wanted to delete it, to erase it forever. Yet her hand froze. She read it repeatedly until her chest tightened against her will. She remembered those childhood violin recitals, the crowd's empty seat, and how she had glanced at it anyway. Evelyn had always been there, smiling, applauding, but her father never. Now, he asked to be present. Would she let him? Olivia Rose walked to the window. The Golden Gate Bridge loomed through the fog. She clenched her jaw, then turned back to her laptop. Her fingers tapped a reply. I got the letter. I promise nothing. But I read it all. She sent it cold, brief. But inside her chest, a door long bolted shivered faintly. Beverly Hills. Morning. Rick sat in the kitchen, clutching his coffee. His eyes were sunken, sleepless, waiting. Evelyn entered, her cream dress immaculate, her phone in hand. From Sophia, she said, laying the phone down. She's not ready to answer, but she feels lighter. Rick looked up, a fragile light flickering in his gaze. And Olivia? Evelyn hesitated, then spoke. She wrote, I've read it. No promises, but I read it all. Rick shivered, setting his cup down, his shoulders trembling. That's enough. Dear God, that's enough. Evelyn studied him, no longer the arrogant man he once was, but a small, fragile figure, grateful for crumbs of grace. For once, she did not extinguish it. That afternoon, Rick opened a new leather notebook. On its first page, he wrote, the letters never sent. Not apologies, not excuses. Just reflections. Sophia breathing lighter. Olivia's cold reply. Evelyn no longer stops him. The ink blurred in places with tears, but his hand kept moving. He knew he would never be forgiven, but perhaps he could still exist, quietly, in the silence of others. That night, Evelyn opened her journal. Sophia allowed herself to breathe. Olivia allowed herself to read. Neither forgave, but neither turned away. Perhaps late letters achieved what spoken words never could. They cracked the wall. Rick sees light. I see only a fissure. But even so, darkness is no longer absolute. She closed the book, resting her chin on her hand. Deep inside, she knew. The battle was not over, but silence, once only rejection, had shifted. Now, it carried the weight of listening, and that was the first step of something new. San Francisco greeted Rick with its familiar shroud of fog. From afar, the Golden Gate loomed like a fading giant, dissolving into the gray. He stood before a modest brick building in the Mission District, the headquarters of the Soundstart Foundation, Olivia's creation, a non-profit dedicated to helping children through music and therapeutic science. Rick drew a deep breath and climbed the steps. His heart raced not with the thrill of high-stakes deals or investor meetings, but with a fear he had never known. Once, he had walked into boardrooms armed with millions, clasping hands with politicians and moguls. Today, he faced an old wooden door that led to a world where money and power meant nothing. The door opened. A young woman with curly hair, wearing a green t-shirt with the Soundstart logo, eyed him curiously. "Who are you here to see, sir?" Rick swallowed. I came to volunteer. My name is Rick Hawthorne." She scanned a list, frowned. "A new volunteer? Today we're prepping instruments for the kids' weekend concert. You can help clean and carry equipment." Rick nodded at once. Of course. 20 volunteers bustled about polishing violins, tuning guitars, and setting up keyboards. No one noticed him. No one cared who he had been. Rick bent over a child-sized violin, wiping its strings with trembling hands. Once steady on contracts and pens, his fingers shook over fragile wood and string. Yet, when he glanced up, he saw a girl of 10 watching him silently, her wide eyes curious. And for the first time in years, peace flickered inside him. During break, Rick sat on a rickety chair with a paper cup of coffee. Beside him, a thin boy of about 8 eyes distant, fingers drumming on his knees. "That's Leo," a supervisor whispered. "Autistic. Doesn't talk much. but he liked sitting near quiet people. Rick nodded. He didn't speak. He just sat, letting silence wrap around them. Unexpectedly, Leo stayed. His fingers tapped a rhythm on his leg. Rick tapped it back. The boy glanced at him, surprised, then answered with another rhythm. A conversation unfolded in taps and beats. No words, only sound. Rick's throat tightened. In 15 years, he had never shared such stillness with his daughters. And now, a stranger's child gave him the chance in this humble room. By late afternoon, Olivia appeared. White blouse, jeans, hair tied back, her face sharp with focus. The volunteers greeted her with respect. She froze when she saw Rick bent over a piano with a rag. "Dad." Her voice was cold, clipped. Rick straightened. "Olivia." She studied him. "I hear you're volunteering." Rick nodded. "Yes, not for forgiveness. Only to be present, in silence." Her arms crossed, eyes like blades. "Good. Then remember, no one here cares who you once were. You're just the man who polishes violins and carries chairs. If you can't accept that, walk away now." Rick bowed his head. "I understand." Olivia held his gaze for a beat longer, then turned to a volunteer. "Put him on storage duty. Don't go easy." She left without another word. No hug, no smile. Yet Rick didn't feel rejected. For the first time in years, his daughter had let him stay. That night, in a small rented room near the docks, Rick opened his leather journal. Day 1. I polished violins, carried speakers, and cleaned storage. No one recognized Rick Hawthorne, and I felt lighter for it. I sat beside a boy named Leo. We spoke in taps. I never knew silence could be a language. Olivia looked at me as a stranger, and that's true. But at least today, I was there. The page trembled under his penlight. Rick leaned back, eyes closed, and in the hollow of his chest, he felt a strange thing. Peace. Days passed. Rick became a fixture at Soundstart. He arrived early and left late, always making sure chairs and instruments were in order. No one mentioned his past. No one gave him titles. He was simply Rick, the silver-haired volunteer, quiet but dependable. At first, some young helpers eyed him warily, but his patience wore down suspicion. He never complained about menial chores, sought praise, or spoke over others. He listened, nodded, and worked. One afternoon, a girl struggled with a cello string. Rick crouched beside her. "May I try?" He fumbled, but managed. She smiled. "Thanks, Uncle Rick. You're good at this." It was the first thank you he had heard in years that carried no bitterness. The children noticed him too. Leo sought him out each break, their fingers tapping rhythms only they understood. A blonde 8-year-old, Emma, was delayed in speech and once placed her small guitar in his hands. "You play." Rick froze. He had never touched a guitar, but her expectant eyes left no escape. He strummed clumsy chords. The sound was raw, awkward. Emma clapped anyway, laughing. Rick laughed with her, a sound unforced, unfamiliar. From then on, Emma returned daily, handing him the guitar. Rick learned simple chords to see her smile. Olivia watched. She didn't comment, didn't praise, but her eyes lingered more often. A young volunteer remarked during a meeting, "Rick works hard. The kids like him." Olivia's only reply was a nod. Still, she couldn't deny that he hadn't walked away or demanded recognition. One evening, after class, Emma hugged Rick tightly around the waist. "Bye, Uncle Rick," she chirped. Rick stiffened, then slowly placed a hand on her hair. For an instant, he saw Sophia and Olivia as children again, rushing to embrace him after school. The memory crushed his chest. He sat down hard on the last chair, covering his face with both hands. When he looked up, Olivia was there. She had been watching. "Dad," she said quietly. Rick startled, wiping his eyes. Olivia stepped closer, stopping a few feet away. "I see you. Here. But remember, this doesn't erase the past." Rick nodded, voice thick. "I know, I feel like I'm learning how to breathe again." Olivia studied him for a long time. Then, she didn't walk away for the first time in years. She sat, a chair apart, and shared his silence just as Leo had. A week later, The children performed a small recital. Rick's task was backstage, checking violins, arranging chairs, and carrying amps. He expected nothing more. When it ended, Olivia addressed the volunteers. "Thank you all for your work," she said, her voice calm. Then her eyes flicked briefly toward him. "We especially thank those who joined recently and worked tirelessly. Thank you, Rick." Applause filled the hall. Rick froze. These claps were not the thunderous ovations of investors or media. They were softer, smaller, but they shook his heart more deeply than any he had known. That night, he wrote, "This week, I cleaned storage, polished instruments, stumbled through guitar chords, laughed with children, and for the first time Olivia said my name aloud before others, without denial. I will never call this forgiveness, but if existing means being hugged by a child or sitting quietly beside my daughter, then I am existing, and for the first time, I feel alive." Rick closed the journal, leaned back, and smiled a tired, fragile smile, but one of peace. The ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria glittered beneath chandeliers of crystal. Round tables draped in white linen shimmered with champagne flutes and vases of white roses. On stage, a great banner unfurled, "Women and Resilience Summit, building what tried to break us." The event had gathered some of the most powerful women in America, leaders in business, science, art, and social change. But this year, all eyes were on one name, Evelyn Hawthorne. Backstage, Evelyn rested one hand on the microphone. She wore an emerald gown with a clean, regal, and graceful cut. Her dark hair, streaked with silver, was pulled into a high chignon. Her eyes burned with calm fire. Evelyn did not perform authority, she was authority. Her assistant whispered, "Are you ready?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "I've been ready my whole life." When the MC announced her name, the hall rose, thunderous applause cascading like a wave. Evelyn stepped forward, slow, measured, unwavering. No script, no teleprompter, only her story. "Good evening," she began, her voice steady, resonant, carrying across the vast hall. "My name is Evelyn Hawthorne. I was once a wife. I became a mother, and in the wreckage that should have broken me, I found myself." The applause quieted. Silence, thick and expectant, fell. "I am not here to tell a fairy tale," Evelyn said. "I am here to tell the truth. The truth of a woman left behind with 2 daughters, an empty house, and 100 unanswered questions. For a long time, I thought someone else's leaving defined my worth. Then I realized his leaving cleared the way for a greater journey." Heads nodded in the audience. A few women wiped their eyes. At the very back, half hidden in shadow, Rick sat quietly. No longer the tycoon, no longer the man of wealth. Just a weary figure in a navy suit, his tie knotted plain, his posture subdued. Each word pierced him, yet he did not look away. He could only gaze at her with reverence for the woman he betrayed, and who now stood untouchable before the world. "I remember the early days," Evelyn continued. "I had no capital, no safety net. I had only 2 things, the belief I was worthy, and 2 daughters who deserved a future. I knocked on doors with my blueprints. I was laughed at. They said, 'You're just a woman abandoned by her husband. What makes you think you can build skyscrapers?' I told them, 'I'm not building buildings. I'm building a future for my girls.'" The hall erupted. Some women leapt to their feet, shouting, "Yes." Rick bowed his head, tears blurring his vision. Once, he had been among those who doubted Evelyn. He had thought she would collapse after he left. He had been so terribly, unforgivably wrong. "Resilience," Evelyn said when the cheers quieted, "does not mean never falling. It means that when you fall, you choose to rise." I cried on kitchen floors. I signed my first contract in a borrowed dress. I fainted on subway trains from exhaustion. But I did not stop, because stopping would have meant letting someone else dictate the end of my story. Her eyes blazed. "And tonight, I tell you this. When a woman transforms pain into power, the world must learn to listen." Applause thundered again, echoing through the chandeliers. Rick clapped too softly, humbly. For once, he felt relief not to be at the center. He was glad only to witness. Later, during the Q&A, a young entrepreneur asked. What secret allowed you to rise above betrayal and personal loss? Evelyn paused, then answered with quiet gravity, It's not that I didn't hurt. I hurt more than anyone knew. But I learned this. Forgiveness isn't for them. It's for you. Forgiveness means you no longer carry the weight of someone else's choices. I forgave not because he deserved it, but because I deserved freedom. The audience went still. Then applause roared like an avalanche, greater than before. At the back, Rick lowered his head, tears falling unchecked. She hadn't spoken his name. She didn't need to. Everyone knew. When the summit ended, Evelyn swept through a sea of cameras, reporters, and young women reaching out to touch her hand. She was radiant. A queen enthroned not by crown but by fire survived. Rick lingered in the last row until the room emptied. Only then did he rise. He did not approach her, did not speak. Gazing at the skyscrapers, he walked out into the crisp New York night, and he whispered, You won, and I'm glad you did. That night, in his hotel room, Rick wrote, Today, Evelyn shone before the world. I sat in the shadows at the back. Yet for a moment, when our eyes met across the hall, she nodded. Not forgiveness, not invitation, but acknowledgement. I exist, but behind her, not beside her, and that was enough. I do not need redemption. I only need to see her soar, free of the chains I once forged. Across the street, in her suite, Evelyn sat by the window, city lights blazing at her feet. She opened her journal and wrote, Tonight I told my story to the world, and then, in the hallway, I saw Rick. He was small, frail, and silent. I no longer felt rage, only distance. When I nodded, it was not for him. It was for me, to prove that I have traveled far enough that his shadow can no longer touch me. She closed the book and set down her pen. Past and present would always coexist. But tonight, Evelyn knew the story belonged to her, and she alone held the crown. November. New York shivered under biting winds. Christmas lights were already strung along Fifth Avenue, luxury storefronts glowing like giant jeweled boxes. Evelyn had returned to Manhattan after the summit, her calendar crammed with board meetings, new contracts from Europe, and preparations for the year-end charity auction. One morning, as she stepped out of Carter and Company headquarters, she met a wall of flashbulbs and microphones. Paparazzi she could handle. She had perfected the art of the poised smile, of striding past without a word. But this time, the questions sliced differently. Mrs. Hawthorne, do you have any comment on the documents about Rick Hawthorne's offshore fund? Did you know about the Caribbean trust your husband set up during your marriage? Is Rick's sudden reappearance connected to the investigation into those missing millions? Evelyn froze for half a second. Her eyes turned sharp as blades, scanning the shouting crowd. Without a word, she slipped into her car, door slamming shut. Her pulse hammered. She had known nothing of this. Across the country, in San Francisco, Olivia's inbox pinged with a message from a colleague. A Wall Street Journal headline blaring across the screen. The Hawthorne Empire. Offshore funds, a mistress, and the fall of a dynasty. The exposé details how Rick established an offshore account in the Caribbean at the height of his empire, under Vanessa Lee, the woman he left his family for. Hundreds of millions vanished during the financial crash, fueling Rick's collapse. The final paragraph cut deepest. Sources allege that part of these funds may have benefited Evelyn Hawthorne and her daughters. Did Evelyn know? Did Sophia or Olivia profit? Olivia slammed her laptop shut so hard the desk rattled. Fury burned through her veins. She despised nothing more than the truth smeared with lies. Sophia read the article in New York on her way to the studio. Her phone buzzed endlessly. Partners, journalists, acquaintances. Did you know about this? Was your first brand funded with his offshore money? Her knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. She clearly remembered that her first investment had come from Evelyn's painstaking savings, not Rick. But rumors didn't need evidence to destroy. That evening, the three women gathered in Evelyn's Manhattan penthouse. Evelyn in black cashmere, hair pulled back, face carved into composure. Sophia, seething. Olivia, ice cold. Sophia slammed the paper on the table. Mom, he's dragged us into this again. I've spent years building my name apart from him, and now they'll all think I built it on dirty money. Olivia's voice cut like glass. This is exactly why I never trusted him. A man who lived by lies doesn't just walk away from them. Evelyn finally spoke, calm but firm. I knew nothing of this fund. Not 1 cent from Rick ever touched us. Everything we have was earned brick by brick, sleepless night by night. And you both know that. Sophia's eyes glistened. We know. But the world doesn't. That night in San Francisco, Rick sat frozen over the same article, and hours passed before Olivia stormed into Soundstart, flinging the printout onto his desk. So this is why you came back? Because you ran out of Caribbean money and needed a family to cling to? Rick looked up, gaunt, red-eyed. No, Olivia, believe me or don't, but yes, the fund existed. It was the worst mistake of my life. But Evelyn, Sophia, none of you ever saw a dime. Not one. Her glare drilled through him. Why should I believe you now? Rick's voice cracked. Because I have no lies left. I'll give you everything, every document, every record. You're a scientist. Truth lives in the data. Please take it. See for yourself. Something flickered in her eyes. Rage still ruled, but beneath it stirred the unyielding hunger for facts. She didn't leave. Saturday. Days later, Evelyn and her daughters sat in a lawyer's office in Manhattan. Before them lay a file labeled Medical Trust, Zurich, 2011. The numbers revealed a chilling detail. $5 million was transferred from the Caribbean Fund to a trust. Beneficiary name, Sophia Hawthorne. The room went silent. Sophia stared, blood draining from her face. What kind of sick joke is this? Olivia's jaw tightened. Vanessa Lee. She set this up in Sophia's name. Whether Sophia touched it or not doesn't matter. Legally, it exists. And to the media, that's enough. Evelyn's hands curled into fists on the table, her voice low and lethal. Vanessa Lee thought she could take my husband. Now she thinks she can stain my daughter. She has no idea who she's at war with. That night, Rick sat alone in his small San Francisco flat when Evelyn's voice came through the phone, clipped and cold. Prepare yourself. Vanessa just stepped onto the battlefield. Rick lowered the phone slowly, staring into the fog that swallowed the bay. He had believed he was fighting for redemption, but Vanessa was the ghost he had once chosen over family. And now, she had returned not just to haunt him, but to destroy everything he loved. Manhattan, late winter. Snow dusted Fifth Avenue like powdered glass. On the 40th floor of a glass tower, a bar glowed with golden light, leather armchairs, and a low hum of jazz from hidden speakers. Evelyn entered in a black evening gown, a fur stole draped lightly across her shoulders. Her face bore little makeup, but her presence eclipsed the room. Heads turned, as though her arrival bent the atmosphere itself. By the window sat Vanessa Lee. Platinum hair still gleamed, her crimson dress a deliberate blaze. Age had not dulled her beauty, it had sharpened it into something cold and cutting, like a jeweled knife. Their eyes locked. For a heartbeat, silence. A waiter approached, but Evelyn waved him away. She strode forward, pulled out a chair, and sat across from Vanessa. Vanessa, Evelyn's voice was low, resonant, edged with command. Evelyn. Vanessa's lips curled in a mocking smile. It's been too long. I always imagined we'd meet again, though under different circumstances. Evelyn crossed her arms. We're not here for nostalgia. We're here about medical trust. Vanessa sipped her wine slowly. Ah, so soon. I thought it would take weeks before the press drove you to me. Why use Sophia's name? Evelyn's gaze did not waver. Vanessa set her glass down, blue eyes glittering with triumph. Because Sophia is Rick's daughter, and a medical trust carries more weight with a name the public believes in. At the very least, I could show I cared for that family, too. Evelyn laughed, sharp as shattered glass. Cared? After you stole their father? After you left me to raise them in ashes? Please don't call it care. It's manipulation. Vanessa tilted her head, voice sweet but barbed. Oh, Evelyn, always the queen, always the storyteller. But let's remember, Rick left you for me. That's the truth you'll never rewrite. The bar seemed to freeze. Evelyn's expression stayed calm, but her eyes flamed. Rick didn't choose you. He chose an illusion. You were only the mirror reflecting his weakness. You think that makes you victorious? No. It makes you the symbol of his ruin. Vanessa chuckled lightly. Still razor sharp. I see why Rick adored you once. But look at him now, living in a shabby flat in San Francisco, scrubbing violins for autistic children. And me? I'm here, sipping Bordeaux above Manhattan's skyline. Evelyn leaned forward, her voice dropping to steel. Yes, he lost everything. But you, Vanessa, you never had anything real. Offshore millions don't buy legacy. And what you don't understand is this. The world does not remember mistresses. It remembers survivors. That's me, not you. For the first time, Vanessa's mask flickered. She gripped her glass tighter. Mock me if you like, but medical trust still exists. Sophia's name is attached. One whisper to the press, and her career burns. Will you gamble, Evelyn? Evelyn reclined, her eyes ice. Try it, and I'll release every document proving your money laundering through the Caribbean. I've fought men 10 times stronger than you. Don't mistake me for someone who fears a woman who feeds on someone else's name. The two locked eyes, blades crossing, sparks flying. At last, Vanessa sipped again, forcing a smile. I'd forgotten. Evelyn Carter never yields. Fine. Perhaps I'll remain silent. But silence too is power. And power I still hold. Evelyn rose, adjusting her stole. She gave one final look. True power, Vanessa, is when the world remembers you long after your name is no longer spoken. And after tonight, they'll remember Evelyn Carter, not Vanessa Lee. She turned and left. Vanessa sat alone, her red wine trembling in its glass, the smile slipping from her painted lips. 2 days later, the headlines exploded. Medical trust, linked to Sophia Carter Hawthorne. What's the truth? Photos of Sophia, at a fashion gala, ran alongside Vanessa in her red dress. The article suggested a hidden alliance, dragging Rick's scandalous past and implying tainted funds might have seeded Sophia's empire. Twitter ignited. Sophia Trust, Vanessa Lee. Some defended Sophia. Others sneered. Daughter of betrayal, no better than her father. In Carter & Co.'s Manhattan office, Evelyn slammed the paper down. Her eyes burned, though her voice stayed calm. Vanessa played her move. Now we strike back. Olivia frowned. A lawsuit could take months. Sophia needs immediate protection. Her brand can't weather this stain. Sophia, red-eyed but unbroken, lifted her chin. I'll speak myself, not through lawyers, not with ghostwriters. I'll face the press directly, and I'll sever Vanessa in public. Evelyn hesitated, pride and fear warring in her eyes. But that means reopening the past. You'll have to mention your father. Sophia's lips trembled, but her voice was firm. If that's the price of truth, I'll pay it. Silence fell. Finally, Evelyn nodded. We'll hold a press conference, but not you alone. Olivia and I will stand beside you. This family will never face a storm divided. 3 days later, the Waldorf Astoria's Grand Hall overflowed with reporters, flashbulbs, microphones, a backdrop of Carter & Company's emblem. Sophia stepped to the podium first. White suit, hair swept high, eyes fierce. Olivia beside her, sleek in black. Evelyn in the center, radiating imperious calm. Sophia's voice rang steady. For 3 days, my name has been tied to a fund I never touched. Let me be clear. I have never had, and will never have any connection to Vanessa Lee or medical trust. I am Sophia Carter Hawthorne. My brand was built on sweat, creativity, and labor, not dirty money, not shadows. A reporter pressed forward. But Vanessa Lee insists this fund was meant to honor the Hawthorne family. Your response? Sophia's jaw tightened. My family consists of 3 people: Evelyn Carter, my mother, and my twin, Olivia. Anyone else invoking our name is lying. Applause rippled through the hall, but the storm had one more strike. Then what about your father, Rick Hawthorne? Is he involved? The air froze. Evelyn's hand clenched. Olivia started to intervene, but Sophia lifted her chin. My father, she said, each word deliberate, is part of a past I cannot erase. He abandoned us, and we learned to survive without him. If Vanessa Lee wants to wield his image against us, let me say this clearly. Rick Hawthorne no longer represents us. The room erupted. Reporters shouted. Olivia gripped Sophia's hand under the podium. You were brave, but the storm will only grow. That night, Vanessa appeared on live television. Perfect hair, red lips, her voice dripping venom wrapped in silk. I pity them, she purred. Sophia, Olivia, Evelyn. They can deny, but blood is blood. Rick Hawthorne stood with me in the defining years of his life. I only seek to preserve his legacy, not let it be buried in bitterness. She turned to the camera, eyes glinting. Evelyn Carter may build castles of steel and glass, but I knew who Rick truly was. Evelyn watched from her office, eyes glacial. Olivia's hand tightened on her shoulder. Mother, she's dragging father into this. If no one counters her, her lies will harden into truth. Sophia whispered bitterly, I don't want to see him. I shut that door long ago. Evelyn's gaze cut between her daughters. Then she spoke, cold and certain. No. This time, Rick must face it. 15 years ago, he left us to weather the storm alone. Not again. He will speak or we all fall. San Francisco. Rick sat alone in his dim flat, face drawn thin from chemotherapy. On the TV, Vanessa's smile glowed like a serpent's tongue. He trembled, fists tight. His phone buzzed. A message from Evelyn. If you have any courage left, speak, not for me, for your daughters. Rick closed his eyes, breath shaking. He knew. This was his last chance to stand. 3 days later, in a modest college auditorium, Rick Hawthorne faced the press for the first time in 15 years. No tailored suit, no spotlight, just a wrinkled shirt, graying hair, and eyes weary but unflinching. He gripped the microphone. His voice rasped but carried, My name is Rick Hawthorne. I was once a businessman who had everything, and I am the man who destroyed it all. I betrayed my wife, abandoned my daughters, and let another woman exploit my weakness to wreck my family. That woman was Vanessa Lee, and today, I say, she speaks for nothing, not me, not my children. He paused, throat thick, eyes glistening. Sophia, Olivia, I do not ask forgiveness, but I will not let you suffer disgrace for my sins. If the public needs someone to blame, let it be me. But leave the women who survived me, Evelyn Carter, Sophia Carter Hawthorne, Olivia Carter Hawthorne, leave them in truth. The room was silent. Then a few students began to clap. Slow, certain. The sound spread, growing into a wave. Rick bowed his head, tears slipping down his cheeks. For the first time in decades, he was no mogul, no fallen empire. He was simply a father, too late, but finally standing. The clip swept across New York. Evelyn closed her hands together, silent acknowledgement. At last, Rick had done something right. Sophia sobbed in her studio. Olivia held her tight. And in her penthouse, Vanessa hurled her wineglass against the wall, crimson liquid splattering like blood. The game had turned. And for the first time in 15 years, the Carter Hawthorne women had an ally, the very man who once betrayed them. Rain fell in thin veils over the bay, fog wrapping San Francisco in its grey arms. In a quiet hospital room at Mount Zion, Rick lay turned on his side, the weak daylight falling across a face hollowed by months of chemotherapy. His hair had thinned, his skin pale, yet in his eyes lingered a faint light, the fragile glow of a man stripped of ambition, clinging only to presence. Beside the bed, Olivia worked on her laptop. This was the first time in years she had stayed long with him, not because she had forgiven, but because she could not bear the thought of him dying utterly alone. Rick rasped a laugh. Still working, even in a hospital. Olivia didn't look up. Work waits for no one. You knew that better than anyone. Rick closed his eyes, nodding faintly. Yes. But I forgot the most important truth. No one should ever be left behind. Her typing stopped. For a moment, Olivia's face softened. She closed the laptop quietly but said nothing. Sophia was preparing for the biggest fashion show of her career in New York. Racks of gowns filled the studio, and assistants hurried with clipboards. Then came Olivia's message. "He's weaker. If you want to see him, you should come." Sophia froze. The sound of cameras, the chatter of sponsors, the glittering promise of her career clamored in her ears, yet deep in her chest, a quieter voice whispered, "If you don't go now, you will never have another chance." She sat down and texted her team, "Keep preparing. I'm flying to San Francisco tonight." The next day, the three women entered the hospital together. Evelyn first, trench coat beige, hair pinned high. Sophia followed, in a black dress, eyes swollen from lack of sleep. Olivia already stood by the bed, straightening as they came. Rick opened his eyes. For a moment, time blurred. Evelyn was as fierce as ever. Sophia and Olivia were at her side. He saw not successful women, but the family he had abandoned. Tears pooled as he whispered, voice breaking, "All three, here." Evelyn stood still, distant but not cold. Sophia sat at the edge of the bed. Olivia folded her arms at the foot. Sophia spoke first. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Father, but I don't want my last memory of you to be only anger." Rick smiled faintly. "That's enough, Sophia. You don't need to forgive. Just being here is enough." Olivia's voice was steadier, sharper. "I don't know how much longer you have, but at least you did one thing right, standing up in public for us. I respect that." Rick shut his eyes, tears sliding free. "Thank you. I waited my whole life to hear that." Finally, Evelyn stepped closer. She looked down at the man who had shattered her heart. "You've done one final right thing, Rick, but don't think it erases the rest." His voice was a whisper. "I don't want erasure. Only for my daughters not to carry more weight when I'm gone." Evelyn held his gaze, then leaned closer, murmuring so only he heard, "You will leave, but I will make sure our daughters never fall. That's the difference between you and me. I never leave." Rick sobbed, trembling hand reaching for hers. She let it rest for a few seconds, then pulled away. The days passed. Sophia brought sketches, sat by the bed, and corrected lines with a pencil. Rick studied them with shining eyes. "You have your mother's hands." Olivia read passages from her genetics research. Rick listened, smiling weakly. "My daughter, who knows the secrets of the universe." "I have never been prouder." They didn't answer, but their silence was softer now, no longer made only of rage. One night, Rick handed Evelyn an envelope. "My will. I don't have much left. Just some shares in Soundstart. I want it all to go to the foundation. Let at least one part of my life mean something." Evelyn took it, eyes unreadable. "It will help children, but don't mistake it for redemption." Rick smiled faintly. "No, only a final apology." That night, unable to sleep, Rick stared at the fog-dimmed city lights. He thought of the glittering night of power, jets, and boardrooms. Then, Leo taps rhythm with him. Emma laughs at his clumsy guitar. Sophia sketches by his bed, and Olivia reads science into the silence. And he knew the lights he had needed were not in Manhattan or Dubai, but in these fragile flames still burning in his family's hearts. He closed his eyes, exhaling a long, peaceful sigh. Morning. The monitor beeped, slower, slower. Evelyn sat upright, hands clasped. Sophia and Olivia are on either side of the bed. Rick opened his eyes one last time. "You're so beautiful, so strong, just like your mother." Sophia gripped his hand, voice breaking. "I can't forgive, but I will remember you stood for us once." "That, I'll remember." Olivia leaned close. "You were gone too long. But at least, you didn't leave us this last time." Rick nodded, tears spilling. His gaze lifted to Evelyn. Decades of rage and longing condensed into one look. His last whisper, "I'm sorry. You won. And I am proud to have lost." Evelyn did not weep. She laid a hand on his chest. "Go. You left us darkness. But from here, I'll guard their light." Rick exhaled. The line on the monitor steadied, then fell silent. The room froze. Sophia collapsed into Olivia's arms, sobbing. Olivia held her tight, her own eyes burning. Evelyn turned to the window, lips trembling, but her face unbroken. Rick Hawthorne was gone, But in leaving, he gave them not forgiveness, but truth. His memorial was held quietly at Soundstart, as he had wished. No politicians, no tycoons, only children, volunteers, and family. Leo tapped rhythm on a chair, the beat echoing through the hall. Emma strummed the few chords Rick had once practiced. Awkward, imperfect, but truer than any symphony he'd ever heard. Sophia read, "My father made mistakes I cannot erase. But he also taught me a lesson. People can fall and rise again, even late. I'll carry that lesson into every collection, to remind myself and others that beauty is born from resilience." Olivia spoke next. "I once thought my father was only a stain, but in his final days, he was present. And for me, that is enough. I'll continue my research to be present for children just as he learned at Soundstart." Evelyn closed the service with a steady voice. "Rick Hawthorne is gone. But this story was never only about him. It is about those who remain with us, who know the past does not dictate the future. We will continue in our own light." Spring came. In Paris, Sophia unveiled her collection. At the finale, images of sketches she had drawn by Rick's bedside appeared on the runway. Critics called it a collection of memory and unfinished forgiveness. At Stanford, Olivia published groundbreaking work on genetics. On the first page, she wrote, "Presence matters more than promises. A child needs you there, not perfect." Evelyn spent more time at Soundstart. She attended small concerts, sitting in the crowd, smiling when she saw an old volunteer fumbling with strings almost tenderly reminded of Rick. One night, alone in her Manhattan office, Evelyn opened her journal. She wrote the last line, "You are gone, but our daughters stand. I kept my promise. The lights have not gone out, Sophia, Olivia, and the children of Soundstart will carry them on. And you, Rick, you left us one final light. This time, I will not extinguish it." She closed the book, leaned back. Outside, New York blazed with 1,000 lights. And in her heart, instead of shadows, there flickered small, steady flames, lights that would never go out.